This will be a conversation between me and Carole. I very much welcome attendees to post questions and comments in the chat. I will monitor both. So hopefully it'll feel like we're having a real conversation. We are here to kind of celebrate and find out more about Funny Women of a Certain Age on Showtime, which Carole runs and has done now 3 versions of, iterations of. It's becoming a franchise.
Yes.
And we're here to just kind of learn more all about you, basically. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. That was, you did everything. So I can leave now.
Okay, we can go home now. So I want a few basic things because I always need to know, how old are you and where do you live and where are you from?
Yes, I am about to turn 64. I finally reached the age of a Beatles song, so I'm pretty excited about that. I live in New York City.
Where? What part?
I live in Midtown Manhattan. I live around the corner from Carnegie Hall, but we live, we take care of my husband's mom because she's elderly. So I live around the corner from Carnegie Hall, which is actually really wonderful, you know, but right by Central Park. And so, yeah, yeah.
And have you been a comedian your whole life? Has this been your entire career?
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
Well, what's funny is that I had another podcast earlier this afternoon with a young comic talking about the business, and I forget. I mean, I started doing stand-up when I was 21 years old. So that means I've been doing stand-up almost over 43 years, which is mind-blowing. Like I like to say on stage, I could have killed 2 people right now and still been out of jail earlier than what I do as a comedian. So it's just, yeah. So this is all I've ever wanted to do.
Where did you grew up in New York, and like what made you think you could be a comedian? I mean, that's a pretty big leap. Frankly.
Well, you know what? A couple of things. I grew up in Brooklyn.
Okay. What neighborhood? Okay. That's where I live.
Really? You live in Brooklyn now?
I live in Brooklyn. I raised my kids in Brooklyn Heights. I live in Dumbo. And my parents lived in Brooklyn when I was born, although I was born at New York Hospital. But so what neighborhood were you born?
I grew up in Sheepshead Bay by Kings Highway and Ocean Avenue.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I went to Lafayette High School in Bensonhurst because my father was a teacher there. So I'm a real Brooklyn girl.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, so my dad, speaking of my dad was a very larger than life type of person. And I think he always wanted to be a comedian. But you know, it was a different time also in, you know, his generation. He was a Korean War veteran. So most of the time, so he turned me on to comedy, you know.
That's so interesting. So he was a teacher. He probably kind of performed.
Right.
And was funny, but didn't think he could be a comedian. That's really interesting. And then
and he wanted to take care of his family. So he went into the Army. He got the VA bill, I think it is, where they paid for him to go to college. He got out of college, became a teacher, started a family. But what he did, and this is interesting. So like, you know how high school, well, all schools do this, but you know, when you have events, he was always the MC. Whenever there were events for the school, that was my father's job. And so I must have picked it up from him. And also, I always forget this part, and this is really important, because he was a teacher, he had the summers off. So because he was that type of always working, he didn't take the summer off. He would bartend up in the Catskill Mountains.
I was literally just about to say, did you guys go to those Borscht Belt places? And
yes.
Oh my God, that's
yes.
Awesome.
So he was a bartender at a hotel called the Hotel Commodore. And so I, as a child, like I would hang out with my dad while he was setting up the bar, and, you know, like some guy would shuffle in his bathrobe and his slippers to do a sound check. And that was Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh my God. Wild. Fun.
Yeah. So I got to meet a lot of, but I didn't realize that until later on in my career. I went, oh,
how much that has influenced you.
Oh yeah, I mean, and also would influence me in the fact that they were just regular people, because I've made it a point that, yes, I'm a comedian, but I wanted to have a life. Do you know what I mean? Like I wanted to have a child and I wanted to grow up. And so when I was in Vegas, speaking of that life, I worked in a burlesque show. I was the MC in a topless show. I mean, I wasn't, but because I didn't want to scare anybody, but so I used to take my son to school every morning. So here I was the PTA vice president taking my kid to school, normal life. And then at night, I'd be telling basically, dirty jokes to the audience. So I always wanted that normalcy. And that also was from watching the comics just come.
And what did your husband, did you have the same husband through all of this? I know from the show that you're married. Is it the same person? Okay.
The same guy.
Same guy.
Same guy. I have a joke in my act where I go, I wake up every morning and look over at him and I go, oh wow, he's still breathing. The pillow must have holes. But yeah.
How old were you when you married him?
Oh my God. I was 1984. So that would be, I was like 25 maybe. And he was, yeah. I was really young, and which is so fast, but I was kids for my generation, that was considered old.
Right. It was not super young in any case. Yeah. Cause I'm 10 years younger than you. And I got married at 23 and that was considered young then, but you're right. And that difference between us is, so he's been supportive of this career.
Yes.
And he does not work in comedy, presumably.
No, he works on Broadway. He is a child guardian for Broadway shows. He was in the, he was in the original from the beginning of School of Rock through the whole run. He's worked at Billy Elliot. He's worked at Matilda. And I'm glad you brought him up because I want to make this mention. And this is really important because I've had discussions with, I'm also on top of everything else that I'm doing in my life, because why wouldn't I have more work? I have a solo show that I wrote called Better Than the Alternative, and it's all about aging and all that stuff. But one of the remarks came because I talk about, being true to who you are and not worrying about how you look, all that stuff about aging. And I had some people approach me and say, well, you have a husband and a child, so you don't know what it's like to be a single woman. And I was like, my husband, and I literally said this, and I really do believe this. I want to get this out. Having a husband and a child does not define me at all.
Great. That's great. Yeah. Well, did you always feel that way? That's an interesting statement, actually. Like
always. I mean, I love my husband. He's a pain in the ass. I adore him, but I remember one time.
What do you think did define you? Because I do think it's always interesting what people say about themselves. Look, in the first couple of minutes of meeting someone, some people will say I'm a wife and mother and a comedian, or like I used to say for years, my mother died when I was 19 because I felt like that was my defining statement, right?
Right.
So, what do you think yours has usually been?
I usually always say as far as who I am, I'm a comedian. That's who I am, but my defining moment in my life, which made me become who I am as a person, when I was in high school, I was in an abusive relationship.
Oh, wow.
And I was leaving. Oh no, thank you. But it's so long ago. It was when I was about 17 years old. And I had a different path at that point. Because in my generation, you got married right out of high school, you were going to have babies. And then this happened. And the gentleman, well, not a gentleman.
Not a gentleman at all.
The POS,
right.
He cheated on me with someone else and we broke up. And that was the moment that defined me, because all of a sudden I went, okay, I'm not supposed to do this. What am I supposed to do? And it really, within, I want to say probably 2 to 3 years, I realized that this is what I was going to end up being in my life. And that was also, I was always allowed, I'm Jewish, shocking. I know everyone, comedian that's Jewish, but I'm a loud, boisterous, I speak my mind and everything. And when I was with him, like when I was dating before him, I was always that way. And then he was one of those guys, very possessive and abusive. So when I didn't do that anymore. So all of a sudden he shut me down. Yeah. And so now I was like, wait a second, now I'm over the top, because it's like, I have the freedom to do whatever I want. So that was really a defining moment that made me go, wait a minute, this is not who I am.
That's so kind of amazing though, that you had this trauma that then actually liberated you. Because for some people, it would just shut them down further. So good for you.
Well, as we chat, you'll note there's a recurring theme with me, which is when someone tells me not to do something or to try to put me down, that's like, oh, that's adorable.
Well, that's actually a good segue to my next question. Which
okay.
Because I could ask you about I love people's life stories, so I could ask about every decade. But for the purpose of tonight, I'm curious how I mean, I can't believe you've been a comedian for 40 years. I just imagine it must have been really hard in the early years. Like they were probably all men. And so
Mhm.
I'm curious how comedy has changed. This is a big question, but how comedy has changed and what gave you the idea to do this show on Showtime and how hard was it to get it off the ground?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a two-parter.
It's a good question.
So I started, like I said, I started in 1979. And what had happened was I was still searching because I knew I wanted to be in the business. And I was doing I was doing tech for a while. I was working in theaters and small theaters and, anything, cleaning toilets, painting sets and everything. And I got a chance to go and do summer stock at a place up in Utica, New York called Playhouse on the Hill. And I was the techie. I was up on ladders doing lights. And I mean, I love that type of lifestyle. And the people that were part of the other, the lighting designer and the stage designer and all that, we used to after the shows, after we worked, we'd go out and we'd sit around because it was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, like on a farm, and we would be drinking, and I'd be making jokes. And one of my friends, who's still a dear friend of mine, which is so funny, his name is Ed Sherrier. He actually is a producer with the Super Bowl. Like every year, he goes and produces the Super Bowl.
Cool.
And he said to me, you're really funny. You should be a comedian. Now this is why this is a great story, because in 1979, I was like, what's a comedian?
Yeah, like who were other female comedians? I'm trying to think. Like, were there any?
There was Joan Rivers. There was
I was just
Phyllis.
Phyllis.
But
Oh yeah, Phyllis Diller.
Phyllis Stiller. But there wasn't like what we know as comedy now. There was nothing like that. There was no internet. There was no, none of that.
I guess
So
Carol Burnett.
Carol Burnett, but she wasn't a stand-up. They wanted
Right.
like stand-up is like there's an actual a comedian. A comic is someone who says okay, a comic. Okay, a comedian is who says things funny, and a comic is who says funny things. That's how, so there's a slight difference there. So
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, So we were, of course, drunk as because we were in our 20s and drinking. He goes, I'll help you write something. I don't remember what we did, but we ended up doing this thing where it was like a Christmas party in August, and so and I did 5 minutes. I don't remember any of it. And that was I think that was 79. So when I got back from summer stock, I went and worked at a club called Pips in Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And right next to the, what is that? It was a great Italian restaurant right next door to them. And their lobster fra diavolo. Anyway.
Just FYI, I'm going to Sheepshead Bay next week to visit the library there. So anyway.
That's okay. So of course, we're Brooklyn girls. So back then there were, I mean, I was like why is a woman, what is going on? And so when I've said this before, when the first time I ever went on stage, all the Italian men wanted me to get off stage and make sauce. Because they didn't like what, but I liked what I mean, like I felt at home when I was on that stage. And then, over the years kept going. It was a different time.
This is kind of a weird question, but I'm curious about what you decided to wear when you first went on stage at that age. Like, did you want to be sexy, or did you want to look like a man, or did you not even think about it?
Well, I'm not one to dress in general for anything other than my comfort. And that was even in my.
And you were always the same. Okay.
I was always the same. For a little while, there were these dresses that Betsy Johnson used to have, which were like these tight fitted, like jersey dresses that had glitter on them. And I'd wear them with Reeboks, the high top Reeboks.
Oh, fun. Okay, cool.
That was my look. But I never, I'm a weird female comic in the sense that I never understood the whole thing that I was a female comic. I was so laser focused at being a comedian that it was like, oh, right, I have breasts. Sorry. But like there are women that will tell you that, oh, you have to get the women on your side because the men are going to want to sleep, when first you get out there, if you're too sexy, they'll want to sleep with you. And the women were jealous. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want to make people laugh. I don't care what they think of me. So I was very odd that way, that I didn't do that. And back then also, that's interesting. You said about, did you want to look like a man or did you want to dress up? There were no pretty women. I mean, I'm not saying I wasn't, but we didn't play off of that.
Right. It wasn't like a glamour thing or
no.
Like
and
now there are those women like Ali Wong or I don't know.
Yeah. Or Whitney Cummings, the really gorgeous women. But back then nobody did that, and you played it down. And the women that broke from that era, like probably, I started in 79. So I'm going to say early mid 80s. And don't quote me on the timeline, but the big female comics of those days was Rosie O'Donnell, Ellen DeGeneres, or Roseanne Barr. So you were talking about,
women who weren't playing up to be whatever.
Right. But even Phyllis Diller, remember Phyllis used to come out in that fright wig and be like, and but she was gorgeous. But that's what we felt we had to do back then. Really
interesting. Wow. Yeah. All right. So then you fast forward to today, or and why did you think that this would fly, and how hard was it to get it off the ground?
Well, here's what happened. So you said you're 10 years younger than me. So
I'm born in 69.
Okay. I'm sure you noticed this, that when I started to get into my late 40s, I was like, nobody wants to, what's happening? It's like, I don't understand that. And so I saw the writing on the wall back then. And I was like, well, this is going to be, because I was a road comic for years. I was on the road 3 weeks every month.
Really? That's what you did. You raised your kid and had this marriage, and
right,
you were on the road all the time.
Right. And that, but that's why I moved to Vegas, because I was able to stay with him for 10 years because I moved there when he was 4. So I was able to raise him.
Okay.
But I was doing the road and I was doing all the stuff. And then I had the child, came back here 16 years ago, and all of that road work was like thrown out the window. Like people were like, well, you're not a national headliner. I'm like, so let me get this straight. I've worked in pretty much every state in the country in the clubs, and I can't get back on stage. And it was because I was older. And
now I'm thinking of Jean Smart, of course.
Right.
It's such a great show.
It's a great show. And I have to say, and I say this all the time, and but I have to say, if I really do think that when Funny Women premiered in 2019, and it was the Showtime's highest rated special of 2019 for comedy. So
congratulations. That's amazing. It is super funny. I mean, it's great.
Thank you. But I do think that had Funny Women not come out, Hacks probably couldn't have happened, because nobody
couldn't have happened. I agree with you. And this is a little bit of a digression, but I did want to ask you at some point. I've been listening. I'm not a big podcast person, and I have finally, for the first time after like how many years of podcast fever, found a podcast that I literally want to listen to every time it comes out. And it's the Tig Notaro, Cheryl Holmes podcast called True Story, about documentaries. They are so funny. And in this week's episode, they talk about the Joan Rivers documentary. So now I have to see that. But and they also talk about Jean Smart. And so I was curious if you ever had Tig or Cheryl on your show. So this is a different question.
No, I love Tig. We just haven't connected yet. What's interesting about my show, and for the people who are listening, Funny Women of a Certain Age, it's on Showtime, all three specials.
All 3 specials on Showtime. Very, very funny. Funny Women of a Certain Age.
But some women don't want to be part of what's the word? Not community, but they don't want to be part of a themed show, which is fine. I have no problem. So to answer the question I think you asked like 2 hours ago, my goal was always to give women over 50 a chance to be seen and heard. Because even though there are people that we all know that are over 50, like Margaret Cho, of course, now I'm going to forget everybody, but Margaret, like there's a lot of women who are popular and successful being older. But for every one woman who is famous and working a lot, there's 1,000 women that are doing this and busting their ass. And for whatever reason, they're making livings, they're working on cruises, they're doing corporate, they're doing theaters. They're not known. And my goal was always to help the other women be seen. It's
amazing. So you weren't getting the work that you had been getting, and you're in your mid 40s. Still not easy to say to get a show on Showtime. Like, how did that happen?
Well, what happened was when I got into my 50s, I started to branch out in comedy. I started to develop and direct solo shows, which I still do. I directed a Jim Florentine show that's called I'm Your Savior. That's on Amazon Prime. I started to produce some other specials. I really do enjoy being behind the scenes also. I'm using the knowledge that I have. And when I was 59, I was doing a podcast and with three other female comics who were all of a certain age. And we just had so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Laughing. And I always give the male comics, grief for this, but it's like the greatest thing about female comics is that we can talk to each other and not worry about, no, we don't get interrupted. When you're talking with another woman, women don't interrupt the way men do.
Right.
So, and I was walking home and I called my husband. I said, I think there should be a show where it's just women, older women
making us laugh and making other, at the very least, the audience is lots of other older women. And in fact, you have a bigger audience than that, but at the very least you have that.
Exactly. And my husband was like, it was the first time ever in my career he went, this is a really good idea.
That's great.
And from that, I went, I have a business partner that Killer Bunny Productions, which is the producers of the special. And I always bring Dave everything. I was a supervising producer on one of his projects, and we've always worked together for a very long time. And I said, Dave, I told him the idea, and he said, wow, this should be a TV show. So we started making the calls to all the different networks. I wanted to go with Showtime because Showtime gave me my first break when I had just given birth to my son 30 years ago.
Oh, wow. How nice. I'm sure it was none of the same people were there, but that's
no. They had no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Showtime used to have a thing. The best way to describe the show I was on, it was like, everyone knows the HBO Young Comedian specials.
Yeah.
Okay, this was Showtime's version of it. They used to go around to different comedy clubs all over the country, and they would do a show. And then from the 50 different clubs, they would pick 6 comics to be the all-stars. So I was on one of the years that was when the all-stars. And I always felt like, I remember that because I had literally just had my son. Do you know what I mean? I was wearing, I was wearing those,
those nursing bras and pads.
Those nursing bras with pads. So because I had to leave him. And so,
I still remember that, going back to work and leaking everywhere.
Yeah. Right. So, and especially with laughing, like if they, for some reason, laughing sounds like crying. So that it was a nightmare. So they gave me my first break. So we ended up, we met with them in November. We started to do a residency at the Crane in New York City, in the Lower East Side. We decided, let's have a big showcase, invite all the industry, see what everyone says.
I see. You did a show in New York with a bunch of, and who were the headliners?
It was Vanessa Hollingshead, Veronica Mosey, and Leanne Lord.
Okay.
Two of the women who have done the show. Vanessa was in the first, Leanne was in the third, and I'm hoping I will get Veronica on one of them soon. As fingers crossed we get more of these.
Yeah.
So and basically, and when I tell this story, people are amazed. I'm amazed because I created the show in September of 2017, and we had a deal with Showtime in April the next year, which is unheard of.
So you had a really successful, it was just one night, or was it a run in New York? It was just
the residency is monthly. We're starting our 5th year now. So which is, it's just a monthly show at the Crane, tiny 99 seat black box, filthy, the typical New York theater.
Yeah.
But what I did was, and I think this was really smart, when I didn't tell the ladies that this was an industry showcase.
Ah, interesting. So they didn't know they were testing something big for you.
Right. Because what happens is when you tell somebody, okay, important people are going to be there, everyone goes,
interesting.
So they all, I mean, first of all, these 3 women are pretty much the cream of the crop in New York City, but they all knocked it out of the park, like to the point where it was like, oh, now we're going to have to pick and choose which network we're going to go to.
Wow, that's so great.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. But like I said, I went with Showtime because Showtime's, like I said, they gave me my first break. So I'm going to do.
That's great. You're loyal. So then it was did you say the top comedy show that year for Showtime?
Yeah, in 2019.
2 more. Do you have a favorite of the 3? Is there a difference among the 3 thematically? I've only seen the first one. I have to watch them all.
That's a great question, actually. I think the first one is my favorite because it was my first one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Because it really is. It was that's why I only had one child, so I could just say, Lane, you're my favorite.
Exactly.
The first one, I'm proud of all of them. So I let me just say that. But there was, I just, it's so funny. I just told the same story,
And
but
do
I have
you
to,
perform on all of them or just you?
yes,
Okay, because you were great in the first one.
thank you. Well, what's funny about that is for the third one, when we were casting it, I always try to get one friend of mine in because, this is one of the reasons why I did that. So I could work with my friends.
Yeah.
And there were three women that I wanted to get on this next one. And, without giving away network secrets, networks are very picky on what they want and what you have to do. Do you know what I mean?
Curious about that. Actually, when I saw Fran Drescher as the first one on the first show,
Right.
I was kind of interested because I mean, she's great. And she was actually super funny. I think she might have almost been my favorite in that whole show.
Right.
But I also was wondering what the network, like who they would have wanted to be
Right.
first, or how that.
Well,
did that go?
Yeah, they wanted a name. So
Yeah.
that's why Fran was it. And Caroline Ray is in the second one and Terry Hatcher is in the third one. They wanted somebody that with like TV name
I see, like a TV name recognition anchor for each one.
Thank you. That word.
Anchor. Got it.
So when we came to this last one, I was only able to use one of the people that I wanted. And I remember saying, listen, I went back to the network and I said, I don't have to be on this anymore. Everyone knows it's my show. It's really okay. I don't have any material. We're in a pandemic. And they went, no, we want you on the show. It's your show.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So it was great. But yeah. So I'm on all of them. So,
okay,
because yeah.
But you don't get to have everyone you want on. So is it, I mean, look, work is frustrating sometimes. Like, has it overall been a great experience, or are you frustrated creatively because you want more of your own, I don't know, people or freedom or?
Well, yeah, I have to say, I think I'm really lucky.
Yeah.
With the women, when I say lucky, I'm not talking about, because people always go, don't say you're lucky, you worked your ass off. And I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. I'm very lucky with the women who I've surrounded myself with, because they all know that I'm trying to do this for them.
That's great. That's
so when people come up to me and go, why didn't I get to do the show? I go, because that's not how network TV works. And if you want me to continue doing the show, I can't put my foot down too much. Like if I turn right,
any work situation, you have to give. You can't just
right. Exactly. Like if I said to them, well, if I don't have these 5 women on the show for the first one, we're not doing it. And they'd be like,
we're walking.
We're walking. And they'd be like, see you later. They wouldn't care.
Well, and also, frankly, Carole, you're not just doing something for women comics. Like you really are doing something for older women everywhere. I mean, having a show on network, on Showtime called Women of a, sorry, now I'm forgetting the title.
Funny Women of a Certain
Age. That, there's a real movement, right? This kind of movement to talk about menopause, to talk about aging, to talk about ageism. And you're really a part of that. I mean, I would think you've really made a big, dent in that, in the thinking of ageism. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like people?
Yeah, I do. I'm trying to, because I'm fighting it, and I'm still blown away that we're still dealing with this, that we're still doing this. Like, yeah, I'm going to be 64 years old. And I'm busier now than I was in my 20s.
It's fantastic. It's
yeah.
Really,
thank you.
Really yeah,
thank you.
Really great. And are you wanting to do road shows again? Like what's your future looking like right now? I mean, it must be exhausting to do those kind of shows.
I'm just tired all the time. Like I one of the jokes I written recently, I said, with COVID, especially with Omicron, they said, oh, the first symptom is exhaustion. I said, so wait a minute. So I'm a middle-aged woman who's a mother. So I basically had COVID since my son was born. Is that what you're trying to say? I'm always exhausted. I am so tired all the time.
Right. I'm pretty sure I had Omicron over Christmas. I did not get tested. I tested negative and then I got sick. And so I never found out if I was actually, but I was so tired. So I think it's more tired than usual, but whatever. I hear you. We're tired.
We're tired. Women are tired because we're doing everything. And even though, like I said, I love my husband and I love my son, but when it comes, guys just, they,
I know. You don't even have to say it. What? I know.
My husband, no, I have to tell you that my husband does the dishes now. And but every day he says to me, I did the dishes. I'm like, you want a medal? Do you want to? I gave birth to your child.
I know. It's actually one of the funniest things with men, I find, the way they like report like things. Like
Yes.
yeah, like my boyfriend's really smart. He's a litigator. He's a corporate litigator and a partner in a big firm, but he reports things to me that he's done. And I don't understand it. Like, I don't say to him, like, I don't know, I parked the car today or I paid my taxes. Like, I'm just not,
I know.
you know what I mean? There's an
You know,
interesting, I
yeah.
feel like it feels a little like he's reporting to mommy, even though that's not our relationship. I'm not, but it's a little bit funny.
Yeah,
Men,
it's very men.
very
That's
funny. But that actually makes me think of a last question, or we'll start winding down because I don't want to take up too much of your time. You're so great. But I'm curious about themes in the show because so again, I only watched the first one and found it so super funny. But when you watch a comedy show around like, women of a certain age, you start to see the same themes, right? Like reappear, right? So our dry vaginas, our, men, I don't know. And I'm curious how much direction you gave, if any.
I love that the first thing you said was dry vagina, which should basically be the next solo show. My dry vagina. One of the things I'm proudest about, and I'm glad you brought this up. This is actually a really important question. When you're working with women who are over, well, first of all, they're in life, whether it's movies or TV or stand-up, there's only about 10 subjects.
Right. In general. Absolutely.
So
yeah.
Yeah. So it's, like in movies, it's always boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl again. It's the same movie,
right. 10 kind of storylines basically in life. Yeah.
Right. The Star Wars, good versus evil. Okay. The Avengers, good versus evil. It's very similar. Yeah. So what happens when women are doing it, they're like, oh, well, they're all talking about the same. By the way, none of the women, and you'll see this on each of the specials, cross over the way people think would have crossed over. Like every single one of these women had a point of view and went their own way. Does that make sense?
You say it again, exactly, because you're saying on the one hand there are no original stories, which I totally agree with, right? We're all dealing with the same stuff, which is why the show works. One of the reasons it works so well, besides it being super funny, it's super relatable. But you're saying each one went her own way. They weren't consulting with the other or consulting with you. There was no conversation around themes.
No, I said you do whatever you want. And what I mean by that we were all different is, sure, we're all gonna, like, I think in the first one it was me and Lunel, and no, just me and Lunel had kids. Oh no, and Carrie had kids. So so there were some moms, there were some single women, there were,
there was difference. Yeah.
Right. So what I mean by we didn't touch on the same subjects is that we all the women I've chosen, everything that is coming is from them. It's original. That's what I mean by that. It's that they all knocked it out of the park.
They really did. I'm just remembering one of my favorite lines. It was early on. Fran Drescher makes this joke about how I almost posted it today in our community. When you start to think of 50-year-old men as younger men, you can just stop celebrating your birthday.
Yeah.
There's nothing to celebrate at that point.
Yeah, I love that line. It's a really wonderful. That's a great line, and it's true.
Totally true. I was like, oh yeah, that is so true.
But here's the deal that it's really important as far as when you talk about comedians. Like, it's funny because we're women and because we're older women, we do get those questions. So are you guys similar? But yet, if you go to any comedy club in New York City right now and watch the 10 male comics that are going to be on stage, they're going to talk about beating off. They're going to talk about getting high. They're going to talk about. So it's like, why is it that women always get that question? Always. It's not
No, that's interesting. That's totally interesting. And you're right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Someone in the audience is asking the question, are there any shows or movies that you find especially hilarious for us women of a certain age?
Now or books?
Or books or movies?
I love mystery. I love, Sue Grafton was my favorite author, and she's the woman in charge of all the alphabet detective.
Yeah, the alphabet mysteries. Yeah.
And you'll love this. I've read them, for years. And when my son was a little boy, I said to him, I said, so I want you to buy me Z when you grow up. And, she passed away before she wrote Z.
I remember.
So,
Yeah.
so he bought me X, Y, Y. He bought me Y. He said, Mom, and it was like, oh, thank you.
Oh, so sweet.
So yeah, it was very sweet. I'm trying to think of other shows that you find hilarious. I mean, Hacks was really not really hilarious because it was more, the behind the scenes stuff. I mean,
Yeah, but it was good. Tig Notaro's Mississippi is really good. I loved that show. I don't know if you ever saw that.
no, I have not. I mean, the problem is I have to catch up and
You're busy.
I'm
You have a,
busy.
you have a lot
Yeah.
going on.
But
I
I
don't-
but I love the Marx Brothers, and I love slapstick comedy. So I know that the Marx Brothers are like 100 years old, but I mean those movies are still, they still Duck Soup probably is probably one of the best political movies of all time, and it's so subtle and it's beautiful. Like the fact that you're watching it, when you watch it now and you go, oh my God, this has been going on for 100 years, because it's everything that they discuss is happening in our lifetime.
Wow, I've never seen it. All right, so
Yeah.
Duck Soup.
Duck Soup.
Do you like Bette Midler? Bette Midler hasn't been on your show yet, right?
No, I would love to have Bette Midler on my show. I'll put it out there. If you're listening, or Lily
Bette?
Tomlin,
Oh,
would-
Lily Tomlin, yes, come.
we would love to have any of these women on the show, because they have their own stories. In Lily's case, she was the only, because there was Joan and Phyllis, and then that was towards I want to say that was the late 50s, 60s, and then I think Lily started in the mid 60s. So Joan and Phyllis had already kind of they were starting to get their success, but Lily was at the Improv, 70s, probably one of the only women doing it at that point. So
Wow.
and
was
being
that like?
and
Yeah.
being a lesbian back then was not what it is now. So it
Yeah.
must have been just, I would love to hear her stories.
Yeah, that'd be super interesting. That makes me think of Lucille Ball for some reason. Did you see Being the Ricardos?
I did, and I actually enjoyed it, but I couldn't look at Nicole Kidman's face. I'm sorry.
I agree. No, I kind of am with you. And also, Nicole Kidman, I think, is a great actress,
She
but
is.
I didn't buy her as Lucille Ball. Like Lucille Ball was, I don't know, just
Yeah.
whatever. But it was a good movie. It was a totally good movie.
Well, I did like her. I liked her as because when she was actually doing like Lucy, when she was in the show, that I didn't like at all. I liked the acting behind it, but I agree with you.
Somehow kind of not quite right. Another question from the audience is, I'm helping build a comedy series for a small nonprofit performance space, an hour from New York City. Any advice on where to begin?
Okay, can you read the question again? I need to hear that again.
Yeah, because I cannot answer this one. I'm helping build a comedy series for a small nonprofit performance space, 100 seats, in Cold Spring, New York, an hour from New York City. Any advice on where to begin? I mean, I'm assuming this is an anonymous question, so we can't ask her, but I'm assuming there's a reason she's doing this. So presumably she has some relationship to comics. Not totally sure what the question is.
If you're talking about a comedy series, so I'm assuming what that means is that you're doing a comedy show. At
a live show, I would think.
A live show. The first thing you would need to do is, if it's a 100-seat theater, you need to know what your budget's going to be, because even though it's an hour north of New York, you have to pay the comedians. I'm a big believer in that. I don't leave the house.
How much do you have to pay comedians, would you say, for a show like that?
It depends. It depends on who the comic is, and it depends on if you're going to get I mean, I wouldn't be. I'm not going to say that a major star is going to go into a 100-seat theater, because you'd have to charge $100 a ticket to make the money. But excuse me, there's enough really strong comics that will come out and do it for not a lot of money. But the reason I always say that is, one of the problems with comedians across the board, whether it's male or female, is we never give ourselves enough credit for anything. So, I grew up where you got paid literally $30, and they would give you a meal. And we were so happy. We were like, I'm getting a cheeseburger. I mean, like, it was so stupid. So now, if somebody, let's for argument's sake, Cold Springs, New York, you got to get on the train. It's going to cost you
Yeah,
money to
30
get on the
bucks.
train. Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to have to pay that. You're going to have to pay for, for them. Like I said, I
So
don't
at
really
least
know.
250, 300, some
Right.
500, something like
Right.
that. Yeah. So you have to have
Exactly.
a budget for that.
Yeah.
And
You have to have money.
if you're gonna have 3 comics in a night, right? How many would you need? At least 3,
You'd
right?
need
For a
3.
show.
Yeah. 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 So
Yeah.
you'd have to have a budget, and you have to, like, I get, it's amazing. I've learned to say no a lot now. And
Well,
one of
that's
my,
like one of those lessons for women as we get older, right? We have to learn how to say no.
we have to learn how to say no. And I'm going to look in the camera and I'm going to say this to everybody. Stop saying you're sorry.
Oh, I had a call this week with a young woman who was so smart and her language was so good around everything work-wise. I felt like she could run circles around me in terms of marketing and partnerships, but she kept saying she was sorry. And so much so that at the end of the call, I've never done this before. I said to her, "You're great. And this call was really good, but you have to stop apologizing all the time."
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it was insane.
Yeah.
I'm
But
sorry for reception. She was apologizing for her internet connection like over and over and over again. I was like, just stop.
yeah. And
But
I
yeah.
think that's a young woman's thing too, because when you get to older, it's just like, I'm
What
not sorry.
I'm not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, I thought of 2 more good questions for you.
Okay.
We'll let you go. Okay, one, I'm curious what you think of Mrs. Maisel
Mm-hmm.
and like that whole story. And like, did that feel, I guess she's older than we are. That character is older, right? It's
On the show?
yeah, like
You mean now?
no, on the show, like when she's in those clubs in New York, it's before our time. Isn't that in the 50s?
In the 50s, yes.
You
But
would have
she's
been doing it
yeah.
in the 60s, probably, right?
I started in the 70s.
In the 70s, right? So it's
Right,
before
right.
our time. But how
Right, right.
did you like it?
Oh, I love it. I do. I love it. I mean, there are things about it that it's like, this is look at this. This is so cute. Look how they make it smoke filled. And she does, her clothes
Right.
never, if I tell you how many times I've worked in comedy clubs back in the day where I reeked from smoke.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I once walked into a club where you had to lean in because the smoke was over your head. There was so much cigarette smoke.
Oh,
So they whitewash a lot of
yeah.
what
Yeah,
she's
it's
doing.
a very pretty show, right? It's
Yes,
all,
yes.
but
She's basically doing Joan, I mean, because Joan Rivers did always dress like with the little black, the nice blacks.
oh, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Has that been written about? Did I just miss that?
Every time I've seen her, she's always dressed well. So I'm assuming that's, maybe I'm just talking out of my mouth. I don't know. But all
No,
I've ever seen.
That's really interesting because I'm going to watch the Joan Rivers documentary this week. So that I'm glad to have that information. That's helpful.
Yeah. So I think it's great. I think it's a whitewash of what we do. Everyone's always like, look how romantic it is. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I don't think of it as romantic. And when I go to comedy shows, oh, I didn't tell you, by the way, Carole, I have a cousin. This is a cool story. I have a cousin named Gina. She's my favorite cousin. And she worked for like AARP for like 20 years. And she had a couple kids and a couple divorces, but she always really wanted to be a stand-up. And she has become one. She is like 52. Gina must be 57. And she actually has a career now. I mean, she's not as famous as you are, but she has a real career doing stand-up, and she started getting acting gigs. And I just think it's the coolest. Like she literally became a stand-up comedian in her late 40s, early 50s.
Oh, that's good for her. What's her last name?
Her name is Gina Brown. And
okay.
She's Black. She lives in DC and she's awesome.
Tell her to reach out. I would love to talk to her.
Oh, I will. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. All right. So my last question is kind of a dark one, which is that it occurs to me talking to you, and you're so great, is that comedians are often, they say, really depressed and dark people. And there's like a lot of, and you don't seem, depressed. You seem normal. You seem as depressed as I am or whatever. But I'm curious about that.
Like I told you at the beginning, I always wanted my life, just because I'm a comedian, I make people laugh. I always wanted to live a normal life. So, I mean, do I get depressed? Yeah, I mean, but that's more like when the pandemic hit, we all got depressed.
Of course, everyone does, right?
Because, I don't know what it was like in your
So maybe,
lifestyle.
maybe my
Mhm.
question is a little different, actually. I'm wondering then with all these women, like when I was watching the show this morning, I so related to these women. They were talking about stuff I got. They were so funny. I felt like I could be friends with any of them. And I wonder, are women comics just different from male comics in some sort of fundamental way? Like are male comics darker underneath? Like look at Larry David. Oh, so dark. So
Well,
I don't know.
wow.
I'm curious about the temperament, I guess, of the comedian.
Um, you know, I, I would love to get into the why men become comedians, but one of the reasons why they become comedians is because it's free alcohol, and as many women, and I can't say the
Uh-huh.
word, but waitress stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, so they,
Yeah.
they get to drink all they want. They get to screw as many women as they want. So a lot of guys become that, and
Mm.
you can't. First of all, being in a nightclub, and I'm at a different level now, because when I go to a club, I walk in, they say, when do you want to go on, and I go, now, and they put me on, and I leave,
Mm.
because I don't want to. It's a very dark business. You're working in dank basements, and it's
Yeah.
so of course you're going to
Mm.
attract that type of depressive stuff. Women in general, I mean, I don't think women have, and I'm not being flippant here, but like what I mean is, like, I'm so busy that if I was depressed, I wouldn't even notice it, because do you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
I know there are many depressed women out there, and I'm not trying to put you down and everything.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no.
trying,
I know what you mean. It's a different, it's different. Okay. That's an
you
interesting,
know,
yeah.
um, also, y- remember when I started, if there were 100 comedians in all of America, now there's tens of thousands. Okay. So when that happens, you're also attracting more crazies. Like, there have been stories that I've heard, not from, I haven't had a, but of really, like, certifiably crazy people performing.
Oh,
And
wow. Just
then
getting up, going to whatever they're called, like where you just, what's it called when you go
open
open
mics.
mic? Thank you, to an open.
Yeah.
Oh, and just crazy people coming in. Interesting.
So now, it's one thing when it's 100 people, maybe you'll have one person who's a little off kilter, but if you've got 25,000 people, there's a good percentage that's going to be crazy,
Why are there so many more comedians in the world?
because it's because it's easy to do. People think it's easy to do.
Oh, I see. You get up and you tell a joke,
You
right?
come out, you get up and tell a joke, and you've got the internet now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Makes sense.
when I said the thing about not being a national headliner anymore, I came back just when the internet started to take off, and I would get stuff like, well, how many Twitter followers do you have? And I'm like, that is,
Yeah. These are like old people's problems, right? Like we're supposed to suddenly have followings. Yeah, I get it. Well, you
yeah.
probably do have a lot of followers now, I bet. I didn't look you up on Instagram, but I bet you do.
But I have a decent amount. I don't have I don't have, because social media is hard.
No, it's crazy. I
It's
know.
hard, and what's so funny is my son, who is a musician in his own right.
Hmm.
I'm always saying to him, you should be on social media more. He's like, Mom, when did that happen? When did we reverse? Because I
Right.
know more about it than he does, but you know the the constant and the constant and it's just like, you know
Believe.
what, I'm funny, you don't want me, I'll go next door, because there's always somebody doing comedy somewhere.
Right. That's a good attitude. Carole, this has been such a treat. I
Thank
really
you so
love
much.
talking to you. Thank you. I hope I get to meet you in real life sometime or come see your show.
I would love that. I would love that. I'll let you guys know the next time I have some city stuff and everything.
That'd be
Or
great. We could,
actually,
yeah.
I do have a show at the City Vineyard downtown. Do you know where that is? It's on
No.
the by like Pier 26.
Okay, I know where that is. Yeah.
Okay, February 24th. If you and Sydney would like to come, please let me know, and I'll put you on the guest list.
I would love to come. Sydney's now living in Colorado, but I will definitely come on February 24th. That sounds
Okay,
super fun. I'll send you an
yes,
email. And also, before we go, what is better than the alternative? Is that a show you're doing that you're in or you're producing?
yes, that's the show that because like I told you, I was like, after I shot the third special, I was like, I'll take some time off, and we don't know how to take time off because we're women. And I
Right.
was like, I want to do I want to do a show where all it is talking about ageism and what women feel the need that they have to do to succeed as an older woman. So that's why it's called Better Than the Alternative. And I've been working on it. And we just did our last show on February 6th. And I was like, I have to stop for a while because my head is just fried. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm just,
Sometimes you need to take a break. So it was a live show that you may also record for TV, or it was just
yeah, it's a solo show that I'd actually
Yeah.
like to take to do a, or actually even do a TED talk about it, because I
Yeah.
think it's women have to start realizing that just because you turned 50 doesn't mean you're done. I mean, everything I've done, I did after I was 59 when I came up with this.
Yeah, no, which is amazing. And it's so, I mean, we say this every day in the community, like women are generally happier in their 50s and 60s. Like we're happier. We know what we want. We're there, I mean, there's so many great things about being this age, but it's like we know it. Like we're kind of, the world needs to know it.
Right. And all and to the if there are younger women watching, you're going to get old.
I know.
You know,
I tell younger women that all the time. In fact, my partners at Revel are in their 30s. And in the beginning, when I started working with them, when the Wolfer joined Revel, the community had been for women 50 and up, and my community had been for women 40 and up. And I said, we need to move it down to 40 because I have all these women in their 40s to 50s. And they were a little resistant, I think, because it was close to they're 34. And I think they didn't see themselves, right? And I kept saying, you're going to be 40 really soon. Like your periods are going to get spotty. Things are going to start to change. You have no idea how fast this is going to happen to you.
Right. Well, one of the things I say in the solo show is I said, so many people are afraid of aging, and I would think not aging would be worse because you're dead.
It's definitely worse. Better than the alternative. I say it all the time. You're totally right.
Yeah.
Well, I really want to see that too. All right. So I'll come see you on the 24th. I've
Great.
loved this conversation. Everyone, it's Funny Women of a Certain Age on Showtime.
Correct.
There are 3 specials. Really, really funny. This is Carole Montgomery. I appreciate you all being here tonight. And
thank you, everybody. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm all over the place.
Yeah, so you can find her everywhere, as with all of us. Thank you so much, Carole.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.